So since you mind my plan of sending you the appropriate Slack messages halfway through.
Damn it. Unlucky. Okay. Well, welcome to the first Koodoo Learn After Lunch. So yeah, we're going to take a look at Vim. It's my editor of choice, and has been for probably about a year now. And it took me quite a while to get round to using Vim. Part of the reason why it took me so long is because, well, I didn't really know why I should use Vim, other than it seemed like sort of like the end boss of development. And you know, that part of that, you know, the complexity and everything in learning it is part of the reason why it stopped me from learning it for so long. But I guess to answer that question right off the bat, in terms of if it's so complex and it's going to take, you know, a while for you to learn, why bother at all? I think the best analogy for Vim that I've been able to come up with thus far is that sort of Windows is to Linux as, you know, other editors like VS Code and Atom and so forth are to Vim. So like with Windows, as with other editors, you kind of get everything out of the box, and you get to be able to sort of, you sure there's plugins and so forth that you can add extra functionality with and all that kind of stuff, but you're doing everything sort of within the bounds of that text editor, and there's certain things that you don't even realize are limiting you until you want to do more of it. So one of the things is like one of the big things that a lot of Vim aficionados talk about is the amount of time that you spend using the mouse and how imprecise it is, and that sort of thing. And there are key bindings in other editors and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of them are based on control, you know, something. And so there's only a certain amount of letters on the keyboard and so forth. So there's a ceiling there through which you can gain further benefits. Whereas with Vim, as with Linux, you can do everything, and that's powerful in the fact that you can do everything. But when you can do everything, when you can do anything, you have to do everything. So with Linux, like, you know, like you can make all sorts of customizations and all that kind of stuff, but because of that, a lot of those customizations don't come out of the box. Now you've got things like Ubuntu and that do it a lot better these days, but you know, if you've ever used Linux for a longer period of time, you know that every time you want to do something in Linux, it's kind of like the first battle is working out how you're going to do it. But if you spend the time really investing in sort of building up that environment and building up your skills in that environment, it can become far more powerful. That ceiling's far higher than what you'll get in Windows, or in this case in other editors. So the talk I put together is, well, I mean, I hope it's fairly interactive. We've got some people online as well, so just, you know, if you've got questions, do stop me in the middle, and we can talk about it. The answer might be I'll answer that later, but you know, we can talk whilst we're doing it. So the things I'm going to go through, I'm not going to teach you how to use Vim necessarily in this talk. I'm going to teach you about why you should learn Vim and what some of the things that it can do for you, what it is and isn't good at, what it isn't good for, who it's good for. I'm going to talk quickly about sort of my story in using Vim and how I started and the mistakes that I made. We'll do a quick demo of some of my more favorite things that you can do in Vim. And then at the end, we'll talk about some tips that I've sort of put together throughout my own journey to try and, you know, help you if you are interested in going to Vim. I'll try and save you from some of the pitfalls that I fell in. So, what Vim is and isn't. Why do my notes go away every time I change the thing? That's really annoying. Okay, so what it is a text editor. So ultimately, Vim is used to modify text, and that's an important distinction. It's more important than you might think, because it's it's not solely for writing code. It's for editing text, which code just happens to be. But it's important to keep this distinction in mind, because it'll help you to think outside of the box of sort of just code. Like, you'll find that once you start using Vim, you'll write more than just code with this. Like, there's all sorts of configuration files, and you can make bash scripts, and you can. I mean, you'll see later I wrote my notes for the demo that we do later in Vim, and just found it to be far easier, just because it's just editing text, right? So Vim is supremely configurable. So there's configuration options for very close, like pretty much everything you can do in Vim you can configure, and you can customize everything that it does as well, from the way it searches, the colors that it uses, the keys that it uses, like literally everything in Vim you can turn off, on, customize, change, to make your own thing. It's not only supremely configurable, it's supremely programmable as well. So, I mean, of course, Vim can't do everything out of the box. In fact, out of the box, it does very little. But this is where being supremely programmable really helps, in that Vim provides its own language called VimScript, and you can use VimScript to make Vim do or interface with pretty much anything. So this means that anything that you can't configure, you can make, or have someone else in the community make for you. In terms of, there's a big open source community around Vim plugins and so forth.
And has VimScript kept pace with other developments in the industry, like RESTful interfaces and that sort of thing?
No, it's a very procedural language, and it's very simple. It doesn't have a lot. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of what you would expect from really sort of more complex languages. But it's enough for you to interface with things that do more complex things. Okay. So you'll find there's like what some people use for refactoring tools and so forth is this Turn. It's like a code analyzer sort of thing. And so Vim can't do some of the things that you've got to do for like refactoring and stuff, like moving files around and all that kind of stuff. And so some people have made plugins that interact with Turn. So you have a Turn server running on your machine, and then it interacts with that. So that's what I mean, like in terms of Vim can do like pretty much anything, because it can talk to pretty much anything, and that's where it gets a lot of its power from, is lending from those other things. So what it is portable. So a large amount of the configuration and programming required to get your Vim environment, what that actually is, what I was talking about with the configurability, the programmability, and all that kind of stuff, what it means is that you write code in order to be able to make your editor sort of be your own editor. And in investing that sort of time as developers, the first thing you think is, well, I'm going to keep this code safe, I'll put it in a repo. So all my dot files are all in a GitHub repo. So when I had to rebuild my machine the other day, the majority of the time I spent rebuilding my machine was just putting applications that weren't Vim on. So I had my environment set up very, very quickly, because I just pulled down that repo and then ran a few commands, and everything was all set up, and I had it exactly the way that I used to have it on that old machine. And it was actually installing all the rest of the applications that I needed, which took the majority of the time. So yeah, it's cool in that way. And it provides a development interface that that can greatly increase your programming effectiveness. And you'll notice that I didn't use the word speed. It's not necessarily like speed is only like one element of effectiveness. So it's what's really important in terms of development effectiveness comprises a number of different factors, being sort of like speed, accuracy, the succinctness of the motions that you go through in order to be able to make the changes you need to make. So whilst some of the things that you do in Vim, the first couple of motions that you do will be a little bit slower. Everything after that will be a lot quicker. And so if you only do it based on speed, then you might think, oh well, yeah, but that's, like it's different ways to measure effectiveness is what I'm getting at, right?
So it doesn't make you a better programmer.
Well, it might make you a better person. So what it is, and it's not an IDE. You can make it like an IDE, but Vim itself is not an IDE. It's just a text editor. So the way in which people use it like an IDE is to spend time bringing plugins in and doing all that configuration and stuff that I was talking about earlier. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and what I mean by that is that part of it not being an IDE, and part of it, like I was talking about earlier, where you have all the configuration and stuff, everyone's ideal development environment is going to be slightly different. We're all beautiful snowflakes, and we're all different in that way. So, just pulling down my doc files after this talk is probably not going to be sufficient for you to be able to start using Vim, because you'll probably want to use different things than I do. So there is that. You can't just pull down Vim and just start using it. There is an investment that you need to make to be able to start using it. Oh, well, I guess those two things are joined anyway. So it's not simple. Vim's been accused of many things, but being simple isn't one of them. And all that configurability and programmability and increased effectiveness, it comes at a cost, and that cost is simplicity. It's you're making a trade-off there. The difference is that the increased effectiveness and programmability, all that kind of stuff, that can continue to be paying you dividends as you get better and better at it. But the simplicity thing is like you solve that once, right? Like you eventually it becomes more simple because you've been using it for longer, you get more experience, and then that problem goes away. You see what I'm saying? So it's and easy to learn. It's not really that easy to learn. It took me. It's not just the theory behind it. It's also building the muscle memory around because I suppose I probably should have started with, has anyone used Vim before? Is there anyone? Okay, so the thing about Vim is that it's entirely on the keyboard. There's no mouse at all. So everything you do is on the keyboard. So you have to know keyboard shortcuts to do absolutely everything. So some of that comes down to memory. The majority of it comes down to muscle memory. So if any of you have watched me typing before in your own editors, you probably would have watched me type the letters JK quite a lot. And that's what I use to go from insert mode back to normal mode. So basically, once I've finished typing, I need to go back to normal mode. And to do that, I hit JK. And so because of that muscle memory, every time I finish typing something, I write JK at the end of it. So it makes it look like I'm always joking. Kind of sucks. So what Vim is and isn't good for. So what it is good for is editing text, as I said earlier. But it's not just just the editing text. It's that efficiency that I was talking about, and the efficiency comes from the precise nature of the way that you actually edit the text. As I was saying earlier, it's like you've got different key bindings to be able to get to different spots in your code and so forth. So a really good example is like if you want to, let's say you had a chunk of code that was in between some curly braces or something, and you wanted to take that chunk of code and copy it to somewhere else in the file. You would grab the mouse, you'd go ahead and you select all that code, you did Control X or Control C or whatever you wanted, then you go up to another point, you'd click on that point, and then you would paste, right? Whereas with Vim, and you don't realize it doing it day to day because you do it every day, but that's actually a really imprecise way of doing things, like because you have to kind of get it exactly on the right point. I'm sure you will have highlighted the letter just before the first letter, like a heap of times, and like you will have just missed the line you were meaning to click on and so forth. And there's ways in which Vim helps you to be far more precise there. So in Vim, you would, get it to the top line, you would type D, let's say it had 8 lines, so D8D, which is delete 8 lines, right? And then it would take all that, and then say you wanted to copy it 10 lines up, you'd hit 10J, and then you'd hit P. And there's no way of missing that, because you would be able to look at the line numbers, you know how many lines you need to go away, you know how many lines you're deleting, and all that kind of stuff. And that feels really, it feels really counterintuitive to begin with. But once you build up that muscle memory with Vim and so forth, it becomes really, really natural. Like I'll be out. It even gets to the point where you can estimate the number of lines after a while. Like you need to rely on the actual line numbers less and less, because it's just kind of like, well, that looks like about 5 lines there. Oh, it was great. So yeah. And it's good for providing a fully customized development experience. So I'm not just talking about, using your favorite plugins or whatever. It's like everything is down to the way that you like doing things. And if you find a problem that the editor doesn't do, you don't just put up with the problem. You go out, you solve the problem, and then you've got an even more configured, even better solution for you. Like I've got a whole heap of key bindings that I've made up myself, just because I'm like, oh, I do that heaps and I don't want to have to do it. So I'll make a key binding and then I do it over and over again. So what it isn't good for? It's not really good for strongly typed or proprietary languages. So I'm looking at you here, C# and Java. So these languages in particular, just an absolute pain in the butt to program with Vim. Like you really, you can do it. You can program with C# and .NET and Java in Vim, but you have to really want to do it, because it's just not that simple. When I was programming in C#, I ended up making it. I ended up using Vim key bindings in Visual Studio, because you were just missing so much by not using Visual Studio. And well, I've done 2 again. Working on gigantic code bases, it can be not great. I mean, it really you can optimize it. Again, this is a thing that you probably can make it work, but it's just kind of a bit of a pain in the butt. But once you've got a few of the plugins running and so forth, if you're opening up 2,000 line long files, it can really start chugging and not be that great an experience. So I originally was going to have different different groups of people who the Vim might be good for, but the more I thought about this, the more I thought actually it's actually pretty good for everyone for different reasons. So people who are early on in their career, it can be good to pick this sort of stuff up, because the sooner you start getting that muscle memory together, the better off you'll be. You'll only get better the more you work with Vim. People in the middle of their career tend to be trying to find new ways to improve and test out different patterns and processes and tools and mindsets and all that kind of stuff. So Vim is not a bad candidate for experimenting with that. And people who are more advanced in their career, are looking for things to polish off. It's when you've solved a lot of the big problems, a lot of the big gaps in your knowledge base, then people tend to try and find the smaller improvements they can make in their efficiency, and Vim can be great for that. So, and in order to be able to pick up Vim and really succeed for it, you need a desire to invest in your skills as a professional, because as I said earlier, Vim is kind of the end boss of writing code, in terms of actually writing it. It doesn't get much more difficult than trying to find those sorts of efficiencies. You need time and patience. So it took me probably about 8 months from the point at which I decided that I wanted to start using Vim to the point at which I was sort of effective enough at within my role actually using Vim. I wasn't studying the whole time, but it was sort of a couple hours a week sort of thing, just messing around and so forth. But it took a long time, and you need to have the right mindset to use it as well, because as I was saying earlier, if you come across certain problems with the thing with Vim that it doesn't do what you need it to do, and you need to sort of you need to think to yourself, okay, well, how do I fix this? You have to go out, try and find a way to fix it. If not, build the fix yourself. So, working with Vim is almost a development project in and of itself. And you have to keep on thinking of it like that, because that's the only way that you get the real true benefits that I was talking about earlier in terms of having a real customized environment and experience. You only get that from really investing time into it. So yeah, I'll fly through this in terms of like what happened with me. So in terms of, I wanted to start with Vim, and it was a fairly arbitrary decision. As I said earlier, it's just kind of like one of those things where I was like, I want to find something new to learn. I want to try and do something a bit more advanced. So I looked into that, and I went and got a book off PackPub, and it was probably not the best book to start learning Vim. It was, all based in Linux, so I had to spin up a laptop with Linux on it. So it's kind of a bit of a pain to work with. And I think if I read that book now, I'd probably get a lot more benefit out of it. But at the time, it was not so great. Let's get through a few here. So the NAT was just, I just couldn't be bothered doing it. It was just too hard. So I just stopped for a month or so and just didn't really do much with it. The shake came when I was watching some YouTube videos, and someone suggested, if you want to use Vim, then just start using it. Don't prepare yourself too much, and just start using it. And that's the best way to learn it. So, but the caveat to that was start learning it in the way you actually want to use it. Like, don't just read a book and then use it their way. Like, start solving real problems with it. So with that, I threw Linux in the bin. I was working in Windows at the time, so I just started trying to make it work on Windows, which was a complete pain, and was really, really difficult. But I just kept on working at that, and got there. The fail was, it was really difficult to get it started working on Windows. I just started installing plugins left, right, and center. Everything was really, really confusing. I kept on asking stupid questions in the Vim forums and getting torn down by really nasty nerds who said that I should learn what I'm doing instead of just copy pasting from Stack Overflow. So that sucked. But I was actually using Vim. Then I had a clear out. I basically threw a heap of the plugins that I was using, and I didn't really know what they did, in the bin. And I started a new GitHub repo with my dot files, and I started a README, which was really helpful. And the README was basically following all the plugins I'd installed, wrote down the reasons why I installed them, wrote down problems that I was having, how I thought I was going to solve them. Once I solved them, I wrote the answers to that in the repo, and all this kind of really helped me to put everything together. And then the real beginning was, once I'd finished copy pasting from Stack Overflow and I actually understood things and I was using it at work and so forth. And now I'm in a position where if I need something, I'll look for plugins and I know what I'm looking for and all that, because I kind of invested in that knowledge. So yeah, that was me. Live demo. Let me switch this over on the video here. So we're going to build something. As you all know from previous talks, the best way to explain things is in the form of cards. So we're going to build a deck of cards real quick in Vim. So first we need to create a function. I can press I to go into insert mode. And the difference is that in normal mode you get like a whole heap of other key bindings and so forth that you can use to edit the text. But in insert mode you just get to type. So I can type in module exports.
Can you plot this on the screen that you're sharing, please?
Of course I can.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, we're in insert mode, and so we can make ourselves a function here. And now I have to exit insert mode because I'm in an empty space and I want to go down one. So I can go down there, and then back into insert mode to put that that colon there. So I've made my function there. Now I can actually just, so let's say I didn't have a line there. I can make a line below the line that I'm in using O.
How do you get out of insert mode?
In normal key bindings, you press escape. With my key bindings, you press JK, and that's part of the customization.
That type of letters JK in insert mode.
You can, just not really quickly. But there's not many words that have J and K right next to them.
Okay.
So, and it also doesn't work for capitalized J and K. So if there was some weird word that had a different capitalization, there's more ways in which it doesn't escape. So yeah, that's what you can do there. Right, so we can create a deck. So let's do const deck. We'll make ourselves a array. Cool. So I've used O to make a new thing there. Now we can go ahead and I'll press O again to get a new line there. We can, and then what was it doing for faces? Okay, so 13. We're going to loop over here to make all the faces of the cards, and right, saying there's something here about the use of the minus O key. Okay, so I'm guessing what I wanted to be able to do here was just make the 4 and then go, oh no, I can't get inside here. So if I press capital O, it'll make a line above, and that's kind of something that happens with a lot of the key bindings. If you want to do things one way, then you press the lowercase, and if you want to do things the other way, then you press the uppercase. And it's worth noting that with these, I'll press them in normal mode. So if I press in normal mode, I press capital O, it'll make a new line and then go into insert mode for me. So then I can start typing. So there's a couple of different, there's actually lots of different ways to get into insert mode in certain parts of the thing here. So let's make another one for the suits. I pressed the wrong thing. Right, so here's one of the optimizations you can do. Right, I'm at the start of the line, and I know that what's the name is at the end of the line. Now I know we've got end in other editors, but with mine you can do capital A and it'll go to the end and then go into insert mode, and then you can just change that. Now that might not seem like a massive optimization, but what it stops you from doing is having to move your hand from the home row over to the end key and then press the end key and then come back to the home row. And that's where a lot of the optimizations that you get from here are from, like micro optimizations, like not having to go to your mouse to be able to change things or edit things, and not have to move away from the home row at all. And that's part of the reason why I changed the escape, moving in between insert and normal modes from escape to JK, was because I didn't want to leave the home row to press escape all the time. Right, so again, I'm going to skip some of these because I can't remember exactly what the notes are here for this. So it says that I want to create config maps. So I'm going to make a for suits, like effectively a config map. So we're going to do diamonds is 0 and spades is 1, hearts is 2, and okay, I see what it's trying to make me do. Right, so I've done diamonds and spades, and then what I've said is, actually, clubs should be first. So what I can do is it's another use of O there. So I can put clubs there, make that 0.
Can you quickly jump to a line then without having to step through? I assume you can. But
Yes, you can. So
line 10 there, how do you do that?
So line 10 in terms of the actual line 10, or the 10 that's on the screen? because the 10 that's on the screen, you'll notice.
It's 10
With,
offset,
yeah, so with the line numbers, one thing I'll mention here is I've got relative line numbers turned on, and that's makes it so that it shows you the line numbers that are that many lines away from where you actually are on the screen, and that helps you to be able to do those jumping, like you said. So if I wanted to go down by 10, I could type 10J and it would go down by 10, and that's how you do a lot of the copy paste things that you want to do. So I can just do 10K and go back up. And as I say, that's made easier by the fact that you've got those relative line numbers there. Now, with these numbers, when you go up and down, you remain in the same column. So if you wanted to be able to go across, let's say this is a really long line that I wanted to get to a certain point in, and I know what I want to go to. So I want to go to that O. I can do FO, and it'll take me straight there. And that's part of that precision stuff that I was talking about. So then if I wanted to be able to change that to a 1, I could press S1, and then I'm back out. So S is for substitute, and that's something that's worth mentioning as well. All these letters and so forth, they've got mnemonics for them, and mnemonics are a really important way to be able to learn Vim. So S is substitute, so I want to substitute a character, and so you don't necessarily remember, oh, I press S. Certainly when I'm going through this in my brain, I'll be saying those words in my brain. I got to substitute this, and I'll replace that, and I'll delete that. It's a way to be able to remember all those things. Now, having said that, this thing that I can't think of a mnemonic for, but if you press Control A, it will increment a number. So you can just do that.
Control A, did you say?
Control A, add, I guess. Yeah. I mean, you can make you got to make these things up as well. they're not all there. Cool. So that's our suits. I do want to keep going on this because if I keep going with this, then I can show you macros. Okay, so now I can yank this line, which is copy basically. So if I do yank, and it's just YY, then that'll yank that line, and then I can paste it 12 times. So I go 12p, and then it copies it all the way down. And then I'll just need to give each of these things a new. So with this, each time I go down, I'm just going B for back. You go back one word. I'm using CW for change word, and it deletes the whole word. And then I'm just typing in my new word, and then JK to get out. And that's part of that efficiency thing, right? I mean, I know that took a long time, but with each of that, you have to go down, and I guess in some editors you can double click to select the whole word, but you'd still have to grab the mouse, drag it over, double click the word, press delete, change the word, and then click down to the next one, double click, and all that kind of stuff. Which is, if I really wanted to race someone, even though I know that seems slow, I could probably do it quicker. Like with this, just from going down, and I could definitely do this part quicker. So now I've got zeros for all of them, right? So what we could do is we could make ourselves a macro, and I haven't got this in here, so I'm gonna have to make this macro up on the fly. So to start making macros, what you can do is you press Q and then a letter for the macro, the letter of the macro you want to save. So I'm going to press F, and then you can. So now it's recording all the key presses that we're making, right? So I can do 0 to go to the start. I can do F0 to find the 0. I can press Control A, and then I can press J, and that's incremented that one by one, right? And I press Q to finish the macro, and now I've got a macro set up. So if I wanted to do 12 at F, like this, then it will increment them all by one, right? And I could do a more complicated macro, which would grab the one from above, add one to it, and bring it down fairly easily. I won't do that right now. You get the point. There are any number of things that you will do daily, which is making the same change in many places in the code, and you can use macros for this. And I quite often will use macros to do simple things like that, where you'll be making the same change. And as I say, these notes go on and show probably more complicated and less abstract things, but I think we're running short of time to go through and show all them. But
what are your undo options like? If you got that macro wrong, what would you do?
press U and it undoes everything. So the thing about undo is, and maybe that's what I'll do, instead of actually going through and writing these things, I'll just take the important things out of this. So yeah, and end of the arbitrary example, show cool stuff. Right, so if you want to go to the top of a file, which is something you actually quite often want to do, in other editors you'll have to reach for the mouse and hit the scroll wheel an indeterminate number of times. To go to the top in Vim, you press GG. To go all the way to the bottom, you press G, capital G that is. There is a thing that you'll probably quite often do, which is change everything inside of parentheses. So I could do change in parentheses, so I do CI parentheses, and it'll delete everything in there and insert me into insert mode so I can start typing. And that's another one of those really like micro efficiencies that you'll get, because you don't have to select all, you will have quite often selected the parentheses or things like that. And equally, there is also if you wanted to get rid of the parentheses altogether, you could do around. So you could do delete around parentheses, which is DA, and then that gets rid of the parentheses as well as everything else. You can do things until. So if I just wanted to change the first predicate here, I could do change till semicolon. So CT semicolon, and then I'm in insert mode and I can start typing, and I've only changed that first predicate. And there's also, with like copy pasting, there's quite often times where you want to copy paste like two pieces of code like over and over again. You find yourself having to reselect and recopy and all this, and you work your way down a file, copy pasting. With Vim, you have 36 registers that you can play with, which you can like cut things into. So in that scenario, you just cut both those things into two different registers, and to paste out of a register, you just use double quotes and the letter of the register that you've saved it into, and then you do P for paste, and so you'd be able to paste, all those things, all over the place. And each macro uses a register to be able to save what the macro actually is, which gives two benefits. First of all, you can have 36 macros if you want. And second of all, you can, if you accidentally make a mistake in your macro, but you're only out by like one key press or something, you can actually paste what you saved into the register. So you can see in my notes here, see this line here, 47, that is actually, I pasted out of a register for my macro. And the idea was that if I stuffed something up, then I could copy that into the register and it would give me the macro back. So yeah, that's pretty cool too. Now, in terms of your undo, it's got a feature which I have turned on, which is unlimited undo. So it will remember from the very first time you've opened up that file ever, and you can go back as many times as you like, and you can go back to yesterday, you can go back an hour ago, you can go back a certain number of undos. So yeah. There's a command earlier 1F, which will basically take you back to the last time you saved the file. So if you've come in and you've made a few changes and you're like, no, none of that works, I'm not going to bother with any of this, you can just blow the whole thing away and then it goes back to the way it was. And yeah, so the last thing is like a quick plugin showcase. I've already shown you so that surround thing I tried to make work earlier. See how I got the parentheses there? I could change them to curly brackets. So I could do change surrounding parentheses to curly brackets. And now they're both curly brackets. It's a little bit difficult to see on that screen, but yeah, you can. And Control P is a plugin that I've got that will show you files in your directory so you can jump quickly between files, and it's got fuzzy searching on it. So this is quite handy for projects that so that's actually what we were going towards building. But you can jump quickly between files, and it's got like recently opened files and all that kind of stuff that you can jump between really quickly. And as an example of sort of with Vim, you build your own sort of environment the way you want to use it. Control P I use probably about 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time I use Nerd Tree, which is just another way of opening up files, and it's just a drawer like you might be used to. And this is more useful for projects that you might not necessarily know the shape of. You might not necessarily know the names of the files. So just while you're getting used to it, you can go through this. There's also, like I use this to delete folders and so forth, which is kind of a little bit of a pain in Vim. And you can do it, but it's much easier because with this one, because you just do sort of MD and you can delete things. Airline is the thing that is down the bottom along here, and that just it's a plugin that I've got the time there and the name of the files and the mode that I'm in and things like that. And NeoCleat is like a completion library, which just gives you IntelliSense, but it's like super IntelliSense. So it will it will look at things that you've typed elsewhere in the file that isn't even code, and give it to you as suggestions. But it does smart suggestions, so it's able to sort of like kind of guess at what you were trying to do. But it'll also give you heaps of other options in there as well, so you can pull them together. So that's the live demo. Let me present the slides again. Go ahead.
Question.
Yep.
We've got 32 registers for memory saved, right?
So 32 registers for copy pasting into. Yeah.
36, right?
Well, yeah, 36 I think it is. Yeah, I can't remember. It's 30 something.
Is that shared between the macro saves and the text save?
Yes. So what they are shared. But I mean, there's so many registers, you're not going to get overlaps. You know what I mean? And the thing is I generally use the same registers over and over again day to day. So I'll use F quite frequently because it's just there, right? So I'll use F and G and D for copy pasting and for macros in my day-to-day work. If you need to copy and paste between registers, there's a way to do that so you don't lose your stuff. I'll shuffle around registers and all that kind of stuff day to day. But yeah, so it's not usually a problem. Yeah, the path to getting started, you can basically follow my example there, in the sense that I was saying, don't wait, just get started, start using it for something useful. Use it in the context of what you're doing. So if you're developing on Mac, develop on Mac. Don't bother to starting to learn it in Linux and all that kind of stuff. And you can just download it from the Vim website, or if you're using Mac, you would need to grab Mac Vim. You can Google for each of these, or I can show you. I just remembered I actually gave you those links. So there's the links to Mac Vim. If you're using Vim on anything other than a Mac, then grab the one from the website. But if you are using Mac, then best to use Mac Vim. I can't even remember why now, but I remember having problems trying to use the regular Vim on Mac. So start by learning about dot files in Vim. Just have a read around, work out what they do. And look at some other people's dot files, see if you can decipher them. And I can give you, Google's your friend here to find blog posts about beginner-friendly dot files and so forth. And once you've learned a little bit about dot files and you're ready to make your own, make yourself a GitHub repo for it, and have a README. That explains what your dot files do, because you're going to need to understand that. So you'll need to Google for it, work out what your dot files are actually doing. But perhaps not into extreme detail, but at least know sort of like what command you're using and why you're using it. And then once you've done that, then you're basically just working on key binding memorization. And for that, as I say, the mnemonics are going to really help you out there. And whilst you're memorizing your key bindings, edit your dot files that you start with in Vim. Start your dot files and start writing them in Vim, because to begin with, your dot files you should really be working on not in the context of your professional life, because it's, you know, like, it's going to take you a while to get used to it, and you're going to be really slow, and, you know, your colleagues might not love you for, you know, spending ages trying to make your dot files work. So you should have time to just stuff around and learn, you know, key bindings and so forth. And yeah, once you've got a bit of key bindings, you got your dot files. You should have you should then have an environment that you can start actually learning in. So then just go and start solving problems with it. Work on your side projects. Try and commit to only using Vim at home. In terms of, like, whenever you do any development or writing work at home, do it in Vim. And just using it will teach you so much, and you will find so many things. It's like, man, I don't know how to do that. Like, one thing, how to copy and paste into and out of Vim is probably the first problem you'll need to solve, because it's not just Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V. So that's going to have to be something that you'll work on. And then once you're comfortable at home and you've got everything sort of working okay, and you've began solving problems with Vim by Googling, then just pick a date, and that's going to be your Vim date. You should speak with your manager at work and your colleagues and let them know you're doing it, because you will be a little bit slow to begin with. But if you've done practice at home and you've got yourself up to a certain point, there does have to be a point at which you just go, right, I'm a Vim user at work now, and that's just the way it is. Because that's when your knowledge and all the rest of it is going to be really sort of accelerated. And then once you've done all that, just remain curious, keep finding ways to solve things. Always be learning something new about Vim. I'm always reading books and blog posts and stuff like that, trying to make myself just a little bit better with it. And every time you learn something new, you make Vim a little bit better for you. So, last few things here. Top tips. Mnemonics are the best. Learn the mnemonics. So I've got, like, GG is when you finish a video game, you say GG, and then you start a new one. So you go back to the start, right? So that's how I learned GG. And you've got, change word and all that kind of stuff. Try and keep your fingers on the home row as often as you can. Because solving the problem of how do I keep my fingers on the home row is where you get all those micro efficiencies that make you really, really good. One really good tip I got when I first started was try and stay in normal mode as much as possible. So when you go into insert mode and you start typing, there are ways for you to be able to move around the text. You can use the cursor keys and all that kind of stuff. And you can do copy paste and all that, but just use normal mode, because normal mode is where the real power is. And what you'll find is that actually editing text is what you'll do most often, and writing new text is not, well, I mean, it's not the majority of what you do really. So yeah, try staying in normal mode. Set up keybinds to stop bad habits. So one bad habit is using the cursor keys to move around. You can move around in Vim using HJKL. Again, mnemonics help there, or at least muscle memory. So H is left, L is right, and that's because H is on the left side and L is on the right side. And the only thing you have to remember then is which one J and K is for up and down. And the way I remembered it was J is for Geronimo and K is for K, I'll go up. And that's how I remembered it. So yeah, and then after a while that'll just become muscle memory and you won't have to remember it. But whilst I was learning that, I went into my dot files and I rebound the cursor keys so that they were a no-op. They didn't do anything. So you couldn't use the cursor keys. You still can't use the cursor keys in my Vim. And you also can't use the escape in insert for the same reason. I had all this muscle memory. Every time I wanted to get out of insert, I'd go up and hit escape. And then I changed the JK thing, and to help me learn it, I made escape do nothing, so that I started using the JK. Make a key binding in your dot files for editing them and sourcing them. You will be editing your dot files quite often, especially at the start. And so my to edit my doc files, I press leader. For me is space. So I press space EV, which is space edit Vim, and that opens up my doc files in Vim. I can make any changes that I've just found out about or I need to make, and then I press space SV, which is source Vim, and what that does is reload the configuration. So whenever I find something that's not quite right, or I want to turn this off or on or whatever, just space EV, make change, space SV, I'm all good, and I'm ready to go again. And that really speeds things up. Symlink your doc files on your machine to your GitHub repo so that you can make easy commits. Again, you're going to be making heaps of changes in the early days, and you're going to want to be committing them to your GitHub fairly frequently. So if the machine blows up, you don't lose that portability. So yeah, for that, what I've done is I've symlinked all my files that are actually on the machine back to my repo. So every time I make a change to my doc files or something, it actually makes a change in the repo, and then I'll just have to commit it and push it up. And if you need an example of how to do that, you can look at my doc files. What have I done? Okay, and try and avoid repeatedly hitting the same navigation key because it's a smell. I still do this, and I'm working really hard not to do this. But you saw earlier, you could go down 10 lines by pressing 10J, and the inclination is just to hold down the J key and let it go all the way down. And I'm still trying really hard to actually use those keys, but it's an ongoing battle. But you will get a lot more benefits if you actually use that sort of stuff. And then, the best plugins that I think for beginners to start with is Vim Sensible, and that does, it basically sets you up with, it's sensible beginner dot files. So it basically sets you up with dot files that are, they're very, very simple, but they make it a little bit more intuitive to use it. Nerdtree, because it's comfortable, it's that thing that popped out on the left, which was the file hierarchy and so forth. I think that just makes it for a little bit more comfortable transition for people who haven't used Vim before. And Vim JavaScript, which does syntax highlighting and so forth for JavaScript. So that's it. That's everything. That's everything I've got to say.
Silly question, but is dot file the configuration file in Vim? What's the dot file in Vim?
A dot file, yeah, it's the configuration file. So I can take you for a quick look at my dot files here. These are my dot files here. So vimrc is the dot file for Vim. That's what sets everything up. Koodoo is the emulator that I use in Windows. You can see that I've got these dot files. I've made it so that these same dot files work on both Windows and Mac OS, because originally I was making them for Windows, and then I came here and it was the first time I was using Mac OS, so I've had to sort of adapt them to work with Mac. I've got my hyper my hyperterm dot files, my ZSH, all that kind of stuff. And as I say, this you pull this down. I've got instructions for installing, which look a lot longer than they actually are. A lot of these are just run this command, run that command, and everything's all done. It's an explanation of all the plugins that I'm using. As you can see, I'm using quite a few. These are all my key bindings that I've added that you can use. This is my first one, cab, close all buffers. This is for when I've got a heap of things open and I just want to close them all, but I don't want to exit Vim. So that's pretty cool. And here's my explanations of my ZSH rebinds and some problems that I've solved. There was more than this, but when I started the Mac one, I kind of restarted the README. So I've got a link here. You can go back to the old ones if you've got if you come across any problems that maybe I've come across, then you might find them solved here. So yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one question. I was wondering how long it would take to create a macro to replace Robin.
Well, I mean, you could just make every command that you do in Vim sleep for 2 minutes, right? And then
Okay, yeah, I'll keep that. No, it's really good talk. You've pretty much sold me on that, at least attempting it with my home projects, as you said. That's probably actually a far more pragmatic way of approach. I think my main fear was always that it would end up slowing down any sort of work-related work I was doing. So I think I'll try and do that approach of just using it on my home projects, essentially.
Yeah, it will guaranteed slow you down by a lot when you first start. But if you do that practice at home, give it a couple of months of working on your own projects. That's what I was saying at the start. Like with those 8 months, it wasn't 8 months, 8 hours a day or anything like that. It was just because it was, as I was doing my side projects and all that kind of stuff, it took me a long time to sort of, cover off where I felt, okay, yeah, I think I'll be okay now if I come in. You'll never be an expert when you first start, but at least you can be a little bit quicker.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
A question around if you want to edit multiple files, so if you want to do like a macro across a bunch of files, maybe you want to make the same change in terms of different places. Does it work well for that, or would you do that outside of them?
I'd love to open up Vim and show you how to do it, but I'd have to change everything over on the video again. But the short answer is yes. You can do things across multiple files and stuff. If I make a macro in one file, then I can just take that to another file. There are ways you will Vim's been around since the 70s, man. So people have been coming up with more exciting ways to do things in it for years and years and years and years. So I know I have seen things like scripts and stuff that you can make to run macros across a heap of files all at once. But if you Googled for that, I'm sure you would find it very, very quickly. In terms of things that I want to do in multiple files, my workflow for that generally is to make myself a macro, and then I've got a thing called ACK, which is a code optimized sort of find all function. And then I would find whatever I want to change in each of the files, and then it gives you a quick list, and I just go through each of those and then go ahead and hit my macro button, and it'd go and do the thing for me, and yeah, it'd just be a matter of just hitting this, the same 2 or 3 keys over and over again.
Cool.
Why don't you think it's good for strongly typed languages? Like, is it like just where it dynamically highlights where there's a type mismatch or like stuff like that?
Yeah, you lose a lot of the. I mean, as I say, it's all those downsides of the type languages as well as the the large code bases. It's not that Vim can't do them. You certainly can do it, but it's just kind of a bit of a pain in the butt. So you can use that turn thing that we were talking about earlier in order to regain the IntelliSense that you would otherwise get from the code editors. But particularly with like C# and Java, you've got like what's it called now? ReSharper. That you can use that does so many powerful things that you can do in Vim, but you just get them out the box with ReSharper, and it's just like, well, there you go. You can do all that kind of stuff. And I guess it's just a bit of a cost benefit sort of thing, because also like like Visual Studio gives you all the things around, all the performance monitors and the debugging tools and watch windows and all that sort of stuff. Which by the time you recreate all that stuff in Vim, you have to really, really love Vim to want to do that. So as I say, when I was using C#, there was a plugin for Visual Studio which gave you an okay facsimile of the Vim key bindings in Visual Studio. So I did that. So rather than bringing Visual Studio into Vim, I brought Vim into Visual Studio.
Okay.
Mm.
Do you find that, like, because C# compiled, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that, like, it being a compiled language kind of suffers a bit from Vim as well? Or, like, because I can imagine, like, are there many, like, good plugins for, like, dynamically compiling while you're, like, writing code? Or do you tend to sort of just, alt-tab into, like, just a terminal and just, compile it from there?
I mean, for me, yeah, I alt-tab into a terminal and rebuild things with JavaScript and so forth, like what we've got at the moment. But there's a thing called Tmux, which I'm just starting to get my head around, which is a terminal emulator that sort of you can run Vim in, which then allows you to make it so that you haven't you can split windows far better, and you can make it sort of look more like an IDE, which would allow for a little bit less alt tabbing and a little bit less leaving the Vim environment. But I haven't gotten into that yet. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is yeah. For compiling and stuff, I'm just alt tabbing and so forth.
What text editor do you use to write a CV in? Do you do it in Vim?
I did. I've got my CV website that I made in Vim, right? Like, my website, that's my CV. It's all written in Vim.
Oh, cool.
So take that, smart ass.
Isn't the photo really?
No, I was just curious. Like, I was just wondering if you actually got rid of like all of the sort of generic text editors from your life once you started to use Vim.
Yeah, I use Vim for pretty much everything. There are some, if I'm just wanting to keep a note or something for a couple of seconds, then most of the time I'll just open up a notepad or something. But equally, I could open up a scratch buffer in Vim and it would be very easy to do. I guess it's, you can do what you want,
Oh, yeah, no, I was just wondering, like, I was just kind of interested as to how much it has replaced for you at this point.
Yeah, so a significant amount, but it's also not the boss of me, so I'll use whatever I want. Like in terms of if I need to use Notepad, I try and make sensible decisions around whether I need to use Vim at this particular point. But yeah, I do use it a lot more than I used to for a lot more things.
Have you ever said JK when you're speaking to your wife?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I had a question around search capabilities.
Yep.
Is that something Vim caters for, multiple file searches and that kind of stuff?
So I've got, like I said, I've got ACK, which is it's like optimized for code search thing, which is the plugin that I use for Vim, and I use that for searching multiple files. Within files itself, there's any number of ways that you can search. The easiest way is just a / and then it gives you a regex based search.
Yeah.
So you can just, most of the time you're just typing the word you're looking for, right? But you can make it a full regex thing. And the find and replace is all regex based as well. If you put yourself over any word in the code file and hit GD, it'll take you to what it thinks is the definition of that. So go to definition, tell you the definition of that word, and it'll also put that in search history. So then if you hit N, which is next, it'll go through all the instances of that. So quite often when I want to replace a variable name or something like that, I'll do GD to go to the thing, I'll do CW to change word, right? And then I'll change the word and I'll get out of insert mode, and then I'll hit N and then dot. And what dot does is it does whatever you did last. So if I hit N and then dot, I'll go to the next instance of the word and it'll change the word into whatever I typed. So then I can just do n dot like over and over again, and I'll replace all the instances in the file. So yeah, cool. Anything else? No? All right, cool. Well, if you have troubles with anything, then just come see me. If no one comes to see me in the next sort of couple of weeks, then I'll expect that you all very politely said thank you for the talk, but didn't actually do anything about it. So, I'm watching you. But yeah, that'll do.